Hey, listen!
Welcome everyone, this is Andre's Restart, and today we're going to be trying to make sense of all of these different Switch 2 leaks that have come out in the last week. There's a lot that's been going on, and it's just kind of crazy. Now, I don't have a lot of time today, so there won't be too much editing. I'm just going to have some Pikmin 4 gameplay in the background. But I do want to get into this and try and sort of figure out what's going on. But there's a lot that's been said, and I'm trying to piece it all together here to get a better understanding of what may actually be happening. Now, before going forward, I'd like to point out that we are still aiming for what may seem like a lofty goal of 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year. But we have big aspirations for this channel, and we want to go higher and higher. So if you do enjoy my content, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. With your help, we might just be able to make it happen. So first, let me go over all the different things that have transpired over this last week that are coming together to suggest, well, we'll get into that. So firstly, there have been a lot of rumors going around about dev kits. And there's been other things going around about Switch stuff. And this past week, Video Games Chronicle came out with their report, and it was then corroborated by other sources as well, such as Eurogamer, that dev kits are out. So all the sites that were suggesting so beforehand, they now have extra validity. Or at the very least, things are coincidentally lining up. But within this report, it was said that the system will have a portable mode just like the Switch. It's going to be a similar style of system that can be both docked and undocked. They didn't use the term docking, but it will have both options. It will have cartridges, but it will not have an OLED screen. It will have an LCD screen, and it's expected to come out in the second half of 2024, and there's been a lot of talk going around suggesting that holiday 2024 is the actual time it's supposed to be coming out, but what was said was second half of 2024. Now, there were several people who came out and suggested other different things. Andy Robinson on the recent VGC podcast was saying that he heard from one person that there is not backwards compatibility, but then from others, more than one, that there is. Nate the Hate on his podcast suggested some things as well, but voiced it as informed speculation, suggesting that he's heard some things, but not enough to say it with full conviction and confidence. But the things that were said were that there may be an 8-inch screen, which would make it bigger than the base Switch, which is at a 6.2, and the OLED, which is at a 7. The 8-inch, I believe, would be around what we're seeing for PlayStation's new special controller hybrid thing, the Q-Lite. And also that we could be seeing up to 512 gigabytes of internal flash memory. This would be the absolute maximum. But where things get strange is that we've also discussed recently that there have been different financial reports talking about different manufacturers multiple times, suggesting that based off the manufacturing perspective of things, this system's coming out in the first half of 2024. And then Jeff Grubb, during his podcast, The Last of the Nintendogs, did agree with the sentiment that a holiday 2024 release makes sense, but also said that he's been hearing all throughout the year that an announcement by the end of this summer seems to make sense, because that's what he's been hearing. So we have a lot of contradictory evidence, a lot of things that aren't totally solid yet, but other things that are giving us a better understanding of what this system is going to be. What seems clear at this point is that this system is going to be a sequel to the Switch. That doesn't mean it will be called Switch 2. We call it Switch 2 for now until we have a better name. But it's still going to have that portable nature. It seems like it's going to have backwards compatibility. If it's still going to have cartridges, if it's still going to have that portable nature, there's good reason to think we have a good chance here. Which from my perspective, I think many may see that as a bit of a downgrade, especially if they already have an OLED and they're playing their same games on this Switch 2 if it's backwards compatible. Imagine taking Tears of the Kingdom or Mario Kart Deluxe. If you play them on your OLED a lot, and then you play them on the Switch 2 and the colors are lacking because it's not an OLED screen and it's an LCD, that may not go over well for some people. But if this informed speculation from Nate the Hate is true, that we're looking at an 8-inch screen, that could make up for some things. it would be noticeably larger than what we have for even the OLED. So a bigger screen is definitely nice. But if it's larger, that also raises a question on the resolution, because 720p works for a 6.2-inch screen, or even maybe a 7-inch screen when it has the better contrast and colors and blacks because of the OLED. But once you're getting to 8 inches and it's an LCD, image quality may start to get a bit questionable, especially for more powerful hardware that's going to be able to run games at higher resolutions. So I think it's reasonable to predict that this 8-inch LCD, if this is what it ends up being, is a 1080p LCD screen. And I'll also say there are different screens out there that aren't OLED that do still have better colors. So maybe this LCD will be a newer, more improved LCD. Not only will it be 1080p, but perhaps it could also have better colors. That way, side by side with an OLED, it won't pale in comparison too much, and in some ways may appear to be better because of the 1080p larger screen. That is all my speculation though. We don't even know if this screen is going to truly be 8 inches. This could just be coming from a dev kit version that may have a bigger screen for whatever reason. And the 512GB of internal memory, that may also have something to do with it as well. My perspective on the memory, I just don't think it's going to have that much. I really don't. Nintendo has a history of always cutting down on this. I think 512 is a very high number for flash memory. That's more expensive. It's not just like basic sort of storage. So I doubt it's going to have that much. I do think Nintendo absolutely should improve on the 32GB, because while I am totally a proponent of just getting a micro SD card, they're cheap. You can get 512GB or a terabyte pretty easily for fairly cheap. Maybe you don't get it at launch for whatever reason. There's a lot of games that have larger and larger file sizes, and if the Switch itself can't even store a single game on its own internal memory, that probably shouldn't happen. So I think maybe there's something to this idea of there being more flash memory, and I think we should at least have 128GB. So my personal speculation is 128 to 256GB. In terms of specs, we don't really know what this is going to be. It's been speculated based off the Nvidia leaks and such, that we could be looking at something that's comparable to a PS4 in terms of raw power output. But when you account for the fact that this system may have some sort of AI upscaling, maybe like a DLSS of some sort, and also that's going to be newer hardware being utilized in a more efficient manner, we're probably going to see a lot more bang for the buck here. And when docked, this system may be able to output visuals that are above a PS4 and perhaps even approaching the PS4 Pro level, which should put it in the territory of being able to get a number of third-party AAA games. Probably not all of them, but maybe we have a slightly better ratio than we had for the Switch era. If not slightly better, at least at par. Which may not be amazing, but the Switch did eventually get a lot of AAA games. But I do think we'll probably get a little bit more. That's the sense I'm kind of getting. Of course, I may just being a bit overly optimistic. We shall see. But what I really want to dive into is this contradictory information, or at least seemingly contradictory information that we've gone from these financial reports from these manufacturers about an early 2024 release, yet here we have different industry insiders that seem to have connections to different developers out there in the industry that are indicating a second half of 2024 release, and a lot of them are saying a holiday 2024 release. Why is there a discrepancy here? I think there's a number of possibilities. I think that some people may hear one thing, others may hear another. Maybe some of what they hear is based off speculation or informed speculation, so assumptions could be made, and maybe what they're assuming isn't actually the case. It's also possible that Nintendo may have had one plan at one point and then they changed that plan. Maybe they changed the plan again. I think Nintendo probably has a general outline of what they want to do at this point, but I imagine there's a decent chance there could be some flexibility. From what I've heard about how it works within Nintendo, there are changes happening left and right all the time. But my perspective is that it makes more sense to believe these different reports we're getting from Eurogamer and Video Games Chronicle and these different industry insiders like maybe Jeff Grubb and Nate the Hate, because they may have a better understanding of what developers are saying, and developers are making the games, and the games need to come out at a certain point. The hardware can be made and it can be sitting on a shelf until Nintendo is ready to distribute it. So maybe Nintendo's going to start manufacturing really soon, if not even somewhat already, because there are dev kits out there. But they'll really kick it into gear early next year. And if Nintendo really wanted to, they could potentially release the system in the first half of 2024. But because this is the Nintendo of today, that has the luxury of being able to sit on games and just waiting for the right time for them to come out, that is still seeing insane software sales and still pretty strong hardware sales considering how late we are into Switch's life cycle, without even seeing a single price drop, I think Nintendo is going to hold off on the hardware until they think it's the most opportune, ideal time to release it. And maybe that is holiday 2024. But what really throws me for a loop here is that Jeff Grubb is saying that he's been hearing all throughout the year that it's going to get announced by the end of this summer. If that happens, holiday 2024 does not make sense. I don't think they're going to have that much of a window between announcement and release for this thing. Nintendo's had much shorter intervals between announcements and releases for most of their products. Of course, none of these products have been a next-generation console, just mid-gen refreshes in a lot of games. But we also have to take into consideration that they do have games still coming out this year. They are still trying to sell Switches this year. So announcing a new system that's going to have new games is going to impact those sales to some extent, I imagine. Now, we haven't seen a price drop yet. Maybe Nintendo does a price drop, and that facilitates strong sales throughout the holidays, even with a new Switch 2 announced. So I think that's conceivable, but considering all these reports of a late 2024 release, I am very skeptical. But maybe late 2024 isn't quite what's going to happen. And maybe this is me being overly optimistic again. But I personally think, and this part I feel fairly confident in, is that the latest we see this system come out, assuming all these reports, rumors, and leaks are true, which, considering all the different sources from different places, I think there's a pretty darn good chance it is. I think we're going to see Switch 2 come out latest October. Why? Because Pokemon probably is coming out in November. Every single year, there is some sort of mainline Pokemon content. And the only times there isn't a brand new physical released game is because they're doing DLC. And they're doing DLC this year. So next year, it's going to be likely the last game before the next generation, because they have these Pokemon generations go in 3-year intervals. So they're going to have that final game before the next generation. Now, historically, when you look at how the Pokemon games come out, they always have one final game to come out once a next generation system has released that still plays on the prior system. But there's a history of that game running better on the newer hardware, because that newer hardware has always been backwards compatible, because Pokemon's always been on the portable systems. So what I believe is going to happen is that there's going to be a mainline Pokemon game coming out next November, as they typically have releases, and it's going to be for Switch, but because the Switch 2 will be backwards compatible, which, by the way, this whole Pokemon argument I think makes it more likely that there will be backwards compatibility, the Pokemon game will come out and run better on this system, so it'll still be exciting and help to push that system as well, while still seeing incredible sales on the current Switch. But that Pokemon game would not make sense to be the launch title for the Switch 2. I think we're waiting until the second half of next year. At this point, it just makes sense for Nintendo to have a lot of exclusive games for the Switch 2 system. By this point, the Switch will have been out for 7.5 years, which is longer than pretty much any system in Nintendo history, so I think Nintendo will really have no issues with releasing exclusive games, and they're going to want to push sales for that system. So I believe the launch title for the Switch 2 is probably going to be the next big 3D Mario game. And there's already a history of 3D Mario games coming out in October. We're getting Mario Bros. Wonder in October this year, and then in 2017, that's when we saw the release for Mario Odyssey, the last full mainline 3D Mario. That's the latest I see it. And I think an argument can be made it could come out sooner. Because maybe Nintendo wants to build up multiple waves of hardware coming out to meet demand throughout the year, and also have a number of games coming out in that year to really bolster the Switch 2 lineup if we are going to be getting more exclusives. For example, I think Metroid Prime 4, well, I think that's probably going to be cross-gen because it was announced for Switch initially. I think there's a great chance that's coming out next year. If Metroid Prime 2 is truly going to be announced this September for a September Direct, and it's going to be shadow dropped, there will be a trajectory positioning Prime 4 for a 2024 release. Prime 1 came out at the beginning of this year, Prime 2 comes in the second half of this year, maybe Prime 3 comes in the first half of next year, and then Prime 4 comes in the second half of 2024. That could be the trajectory we're looking at here. But I don't think Prime 4 should be the launch title. We've entertained the idea before as a possibility, depending on what direction Nintendo's going in. But most likely, 3D Mario makes the most sense, but Metroid Prime 4 as a complementary title makes tons of sense, especially if there's going to be a Switch 2 version that's going to appropriately use the capabilities and visuals of the system. So maybe Nintendo releases this thing in August or September. Considering that we have this history of their mid-gen refreshes coming out in September or October, at least that window makes sense, September or October. I'm putting in August just because I want to see this thing as soon as possible, and it still would fall under the second half of 2024. Technically, even July would count as well. But my thinking is maybe if Nintendo can get out a handful of key titles to really push the system, so it has those multiple months, multiple waves, build up this software lineup and have strong, not only hardware sales, but software sales for this system for the holidays of 2024. So I don't think we're waiting until November. I think October at the latest, but I have an optimism that we could even see it a bit sooner, maybe September, maybe slightly sooner than that, but that's me being extra optimistic. September or October feel like a pretty good time, but if Nintendo somehow has this announcement that happens this year, then maybe that extra high optimism of a July or August release is no longer so far-fetched, which would also enable them to have even more key titles come out leading into the holidays. And July or August wouldn't be too far off from the first half of 2024. Maybe summer is the time when the system's coming out. But that is all speculation. I think somewhere in the second half is probably the most reasonable expectation for this system, and I'm excited to think about the games we could be seeing. A new Pokemon game, I've been speculating it could be a Legends QREM game, Metroid Prime 4, 3D Mario. I don't know if this would be a Switch 2 launch title or anything, or launch window title, but I think the next Donkey Kong game makes sense to get announced next year, because the Donkey Kong expansion is coming to the Super Nintendo World next year, so that makes a lot of sense. And the next Mario Kart, next Smash, can't be too far off either. I'm going to dare to imagine the possibility that this rumored Zelda announcement that's supposed to come this year could be somehow tied into a Switch 2 announcement. Maybe they have some sort of amazing remaster, remake that's going to be for that system. I really doubt it, but I'm just putting it out there because, well, it's a pipe dream. It's something just really exciting, but I doubt it. I doubt that we're getting something like that, but we'll see. Anyways, what do you guys make of all these Switch 2 leaks and rumors? Do you believe all the reports? Are you still somehow skeptical? Do you have an idea of how this timing is going to work out? Do you have a better explanation for why we're getting contradictory information? Let me know in the comments below. This is Andres Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.